Imagine this: you wake up to an email that changes everything. Maybe it's a sudden job loss, a relationship falling apart, or news that throws your plans into chaos. Your stomach drops, your mind races. The future, once so clear, now feels like a fog. We've all been there, facing moments where life doesn't just knock on the door, it kicks it down. But here's the thing: what if these moments aren't just tests of survival, but opportunities to discover strength you never knew you had? 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius faced wars, plagues, and betrayals, yet he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the heart of Stoicism, not just enduring hardship, but transforming it into fuel for growth. This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending everything's fine. It's about building emotional resilience, the kind that lets you stand firm when the ground beneath you shakes. And the best part, resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you cultivate day by day through simple, intentional habits. That's what this video is all about: 25 Stoic practices rooted in ancient wisdom but designed for modern chaos. We'll explore how to reframe setbacks, take purposeful action, and reflect in ways that turn adversity into advantage. These habits aren't just theories, they're tools tested by time and ready for your life. Whether you're navigating a career crisis, a personal struggle, or just the daily turbulence of an unpredictable world, Stoicism offers more than comfort, it offers control. Not over what happens to you, but over how you respond. So if you're ready to stop feeling at the mercy of circumstance and start building unshakable resilience, you're in the right place. This journey isn't about avoiding storms, it's about learning to sail through them with calm, clarity, and courage. Let's begin. How do you typically start your day, reactively or intentionally? Most of us wake up to alarms, immediately check notifications, and let the outside world dictate our first thoughts. But the Stoics knew something profound about mornings. They're a blank slate, a chance to set the tone for everything that follows. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome through war and plague, began each day with a simple ritual. He'd write in his journal, reminding himself of virtues like patience and courage, preparing his mind for whatever challenges might come. He called this practice morning meditations, and it wasn't about passive thinking, it was about active preparation. Seneca put it this way: every morning lay hold of the day as if it were life itself. Imagine two versions of your morning. In the first, you're rushed, distracted, reacting to every email or headline before you've even had breakfast. Your mood swings with each new demand, and by midday you feel drained. Now picture an alternative. You wake up 10 minutes earlier, sit quietly, and ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be today? Not what tasks need doing, but what qualities you'll embody: calm in chaos, kindness in frustration, focus amid distractions. That small pause changes everything. It's the difference between being pulled by circumstances and stepping into the driver's seat of your own mind. Here's how to put this into practice. Before reaching for your phone, take just 5 minutes to reflect. You might ask, what's one challenge I'll likely face today, and how can I meet it with wisdom? Or what's one thing within my control that I can prioritize? This isn't about positive affirmations or wishful thinking. It's about grounding yourself in what truly matters, so when unpredictability hits, and it will, you're not starting from scratch. You've already anchored yourself in intention, so tonight, as you set your alarm, ask, what's one intention I can set tomorrow to guide my day? Maybe it's pausing before reacting, or choosing curiosity over judgment. Whatever it is, make it specific, make it stoic, and watch how those morning minutes ripple through every hour that follows. Stoicism begins with a simple but profound division: what's in your control and what isn't. The ancient teacher Epictetus put it bluntly: some things are up to us and some things are not. Your thoughts, actions, and choices, yours to command. Traffic, other people's opinions, or whether it rains on your wedding day, entirely outside your jurisdiction. Yet how often do we exhaust ourselves wrestling with the uncontrollable? Frustration at a delayed flight, anxiety over someone else's judgment, anger at a news headline — these are all energy leaks Stoics aim to plug. Picture two travelers stuck at an airport. One paces, muttering about the airline's incompetence, refreshing the departure board every 30 seconds. The other opens a book, texts a friend they'll be late, and uses the time to plan their next project. Same delay, radically different experiences. The difference isn't the circumstance, it's where they direct their attention. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control, not a dismissal of life's challenges, but a filter for where to invest your effort. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. Leading an empire meant constant unpredictability, rebellions, plagues, political betrayals. His journal reveals his mental habit, circling back to what he could actually influence. You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you, he wrote. Modern life offers endless versions of this lesson. You can't control a rude comment from a coworker, but you can control whether you internalize it. You can't force a client to say yes, but you can refine your pitch. Here's how to apply this today. The next time you catch yourself spiraling over something outside your hands, a cancelled plan, a negative review, ask, is this mine to solve? If not, note it like a weather report: rain expected, no judgment, just observation. Then pivot to what you can do. Bad weather, pack an umbrella. Tough critique. Extract one useful thread. This habit isn't about passivity, it's about precision. As Epictetus said, happiness and freedom begin with understanding this basic principle. Think back to a recent stressor that consumed you. How much of it was truly within your power to change? Often, the weight comes from conflating the two categories, mistaking the uncontrollable for a personal failure. But when you separate them, something shifts. Energy once wasted on resistance gets redirected toward meaningful action. That's the Stoic secret. Resilience grows not by fighting storms, but by knowing which battles are yours. The Stoics didn't avoid fear, they rehearsed it. At first glance, that might sound counterintuitive. Why dwell on what could go wrong? But here's the twist. By mentally walking through adversity before it happens, you strip it of its power to shock you. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who advised emperors, called this practice premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. He wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." Imagine standing in a pitch-black room when someone suddenly flips on the lights. You'd flinch, startled. But if you knew the switch was about to be flipped, your reaction would be calm, even indifferent. That's the essence of negative visualization, not pessimism, but preparedness. Take financial uncertainty, something so many of us face. The Stoic approach wouldn't be to ignore the possibility of a market downturn or job loss. Instead, you'd deliberately consider, what if my investments lose value? What if my industry shifts? By mentally rehearsing these scenarios, you accomplish two things. First, you reduce the emotional sting if they actually happen because you've already walked through them in your mind. Second, and more importantly, you often uncover practical steps you can take now to mitigate those risks. Maybe it's building an emergency fund, upskilling, or diversifying income streams. The fear of the unknown shrinks when you've already faced it in your imagination. This habit isn't about catastrophizing or inviting anxiety. It's about controlled exposure. Think of it like a fire drill. No one conducts a fire drill to convince people the building will burn down. They do it so that if smoke ever fills the hallways, panic doesn't. The same applies to your personal and professional life. A leader might visualize their biggest project failing, not to dwell on defeat, but to identify weak points and contingencies. A parent might reflect on the temporary nature of their children's youth, not to breed sadness, but to savor the present moment more deeply. Seneca put it beautifully: we should love all our dear ones as if we might lose them. Here's how to practice this today. Pick one challenge you're anxious about: a difficult conversation, a career pivot, even a potential setback in your health or relationships. Close your eyes and walk through the worst-case scenario in detail. Ask yourself, what would I do if this happened? You'll often find that the monster under the bed is far less terrifying once you've shined a light on it. And here's the bonus. This exercise almost always reveals that you're more capable of handling hardship than you thought. The Stoics knew that resilience isn't about avoiding the storm. It's about knowing you've already weathered it in your mind. So tonight, as you lie in bed, try this. Instead of pushing away worries, invite them in briefly, deliberately. Examine them like a scientist studying a specimen. Then ask, what's the smallest step I can take now to prepare? Often, that step isn't even about the external world. It's about fortifying your mindset so that no matter what comes, you've already faced it and survived in advance. That's the quiet power of negative visualization. It turns fear from a stumbling block into a stepping stone. What if every setback was a hidden gift? Not just something to endure, but a necessary step in a larger story you can't yet see. That's the heart of Amor Fati, a Latin phrase meaning love of fate. The Stoics didn't just tolerate life's twists, they embraced them as if they'd chosen them themselves. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Think about that for a moment. The very obstacle you're resisting might be the exact thing that propels you forward. Consider the career pivot no one plans for: the layoff, the missed promotion, the business idea that falls flat. In the moment, it feels like failure. But history is full of stories where what seemed like an ending was actually a redirection. Steve Jobs famously called getting fired from Apple the best thing that could have ever happened to him. It forced him to innovate, leading to the creation of Pixar and eventually his triumphant return to Apple. The Stoics would nod at that story. They understood that rejection often clears space for something better suited to your growth. Or take health struggles. A diagnosis or injury can feel like life derailing. But ask anyone who's faced adversity head-on, and they'll often describe unexpected silver linings, deeper relationships, newfound resilience, or even a complete re-evaluation of what truly matters. The philosopher Epictetus, born a slave and crippled by his master's cruelty, could have seen himself as a victim. Instead, he framed his suffering as the forge that shaped his wisdom. Difficulties show men what they are. Here's how to practice Amor Fati today. Pick one current challenge: a strained relationship, a financial hurdle, even a daily annoyance like traffic. Ask yourself, what if this isn't happening to me but for me? Maybe the delay gives you time to reflect. Maybe the disagreement reveals a boundary you need to set. This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending pain doesn't exist. It's about shifting from "why is this happening" to "what can I learn from this?" Try this reframe the next time life throws a curveball. Instead of resisting, pause and say aloud, "This too is part of my path." Notice how it changes your posture, literally and metaphorically. Resistance tightens your shoulders, acceptance opens your hands. Nietzsche, who borrowed Amor Fati from the Stoics, wrote, "My formula for greatness is to love fate." Not in spite of the hardships, but because of them. So look at that struggle you've been wrestling with. How might it be shaping you in ways you can't yet appreciate? Sometimes the universe doesn't give us what we want because it's preparing us for what we need. That's the alchemy of Amor Fati, turning leaden moments into gold. Your journal is a mirror for your mind. Think about the last time frustration or anxiety hijacked your thoughts, how quickly emotions can spiral when left unexamined. Now imagine an alternative. Instead of reacting in the moment, you sit down with pen and paper, untangling those feelings line by line. This was the Stoic secret to emotional clarity. Seneca, the philosopher who tutored emperors, spent his evenings reviewing the day's events through writing. "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent," he wrote, "I examine my entire day and measure my words and actions." That nightly ritual wasn't just record-keeping. It was a deliberate act of self-awareness, separating raw emotion from reasoned response. Consider two versions of handling a heated argument. In the first, you replay the conflict in your head, stewing over what you should have said, amplifying resentment with each mental loop. In the second, you open a notebook and ask, what triggered me? Was my reaction proportional? What part of this is my responsibility? Writing forces clarity. It slows the whirlwind of thoughts, exposing patterns you'd miss otherwise. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, the most famous Stoic journal in history, wasn't written for publication. It was his private dialogue with himself, full of blunt reminders like, "You're just embarrassing yourself with these pointless anger bouts." Here's how to practice Stoic journaling today. After any emotionally charged moment, a work disagreement, a personal disappointment, set aside 10 minutes to write without filtering. Start with 3 prompts. What happened? How did I contribute to this situation? What would wisdom look like next time? Notice how the act of translating feelings into sentences shifts your perspective. Anger often reveals fear. Frustration frequently masks unmet expectations. As Seneca observed, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Writing drags those imagined monsters into the light where they shrink to manageable size. Try this tonight before bed. Jot down one interaction that stirred strong emotion. Then ask, if I faced this again with a clear head, what would change? You might discover that what felt like an attack was a misunderstanding, or that your reaction had more to do with yesterday's stress than today's event. The Stoics called this process attention to the self. It's not self-criticism, it's self-accountability. Over time, these pages become a map of your emotional growth, showing where old triggers lost their power and where new strengths emerged. So grab any notebook, no fancy pens required. The goal isn't eloquence, it's honesty. As you write, you're not just processing the day's events, you're training your mind to pause before reacting, to question before assuming, and to find the signal in life's noise. That blank page, it's the quietest mentor you'll ever have. Comfort is the enemy of growth. Think about how much of modern life is designed to avoid even minor discomfort: temperature-controlled homes, endless food delivery options, apps that eliminate waiting or effort. Yet the Stoics understood something counterintuitive. Deliberately seeking out manageable hardship isn't self-punishment, it's strength training for the soul. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, put it bluntly: how can someone become courageous if they've only experienced comfort? He argued that regular, voluntary discomfort, like enduring cold or hunger, wasn't about suffering for its own sake, but about proving to yourself that you could handle more than you thought. Picture 2 people standing at the edge of a chilly lake on a spring morning. One shudders and retreats to the car, muttering about the cold. The other wades in, gasps at the shock, then laughs as their body adjusts. Both felt the same icy water, but only one chose to meet it head-on. That's the essence of voluntary discomfort, not avoiding life's inevitable hardships, but willingly facing smaller versions to build resilience for the unavoidable ones. The ancient Stoics practiced this through physical challenges, sleeping on the floor, walking barefoot, fasting not because they lacked beds or shoes, but to remind themselves that happiness didn't depend on perfect conditions. Here's how this translates today. Try skipping a meal not for dieting, but to reconnect with the privilege of abundance. Notice how hunger sharpens your appreciation for food, or how resisting the urge to check your phone for an hour reveals how often you reach for distraction. These aren't grand gestures, they're micro resets for your comfort-addicted brain. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, regularly wore rough clothing and slept on a simple cot. His journal reveals why, to toughen yourself against the softness of luxury. The modern equivalent might be taking a cold shower instead of a hot one, or walking in the rain without complaining. These acts aren't about proving toughness to others, they're private rehearsals for life's bigger challenges. When you voluntarily step into discomfort, you rewrite your relationship with it. A job loss stings less when you've practiced living frugally. A rejection hurts less when you've trained yourself to sit with awkwardness. So ask yourself, what small discomfort could you embrace today? Maybe it's leaving the heater off on a chilly morning or tackling a difficult task before checking email. The goal isn't to suffer, but to dismantle the illusion that comfort equals safety. As Seneca observed, fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. Voluntary discomfort is the practice of walking toward life's inevitable stumbles, so when they come, you're not caught off guard, but ready to meet them with steady feet. The fastest reactions are often the worst. Picture this: you're cut off in traffic, and before you even think, your hand is on the horn, your foot slams the brake, and a string of words leaves your mouth that you'd never say in front of your grandmother. Or imagine your coworker sends a terse email criticizing your work, and you fire back a defensive reply within seconds. In both cases, the immediate reaction feels justified in the moment, but later. Pure regret. The Stoics recognized this human tendency centuries ago. Epictetus, the philosopher who taught that we're disturbed not by events but by our judgments about them, put it starkly: no man is free who is not master of himself. That split second between trigger and response, what modern psychologists call the Stoic gap, is where emotional resilience is either lost or won. Consider how differently things unfold when you insert even a tiny pause. Road rage dissolves when you take 3 deep breaths and realize the other driver might be rushing to a hospital. The snippy email gets a measured reply when you sleep on it and realize your colleague was under pressure too. Ancient Stoics like Seneca practiced this deliberately. He wrote about putting time between feeling and action, comparing it to letting muddy water settle so you can see clearly. Marcus Aurelius carried this further, advising himself, "Ask at every moment, is this necessary?" That question alone, asked in the heat of emotion, can prevent countless needless conflicts. Here's how to build this habit today. Next time you feel your pulse quicken, whether from a rude comment, a frustrating delay, or an unfair demand, try this physical anchor. Press your tongue gently to the roof of your mouth for 5 seconds. It sounds simple, but that tiny somatic interruption creates just enough space for your rational mind to catch up. The Stoics would approve. They weren't against emotion, they were against being hijacked by it. Even counting to 10 before responding to criticism, as cliché as it sounds, follows their logic. Those seconds allow you to shift from "how dare they" to "what part of this might be true," or "how can I address this without escalating?" Think back to a recent moment when your immediate reaction made things worse. Maybe it was snapping at a loved one after a long day or sending a text you later deleted. Now reimagine that scenario with a 10-second pause. How might it have unfolded differently? That's the power Epictetus described when he said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." The gap isn't just about stopping bad reactions, it's about creating room for better ones. Tonight, experiment with this. After any frustrating interaction, ask yourself, where could a pause have changed the outcome? You'll start noticing how often impulsive reactions are really about past wounds or future fears, not the present moment. And here's the paradox the Stoics understood. Slowing down your responses doesn't make you passive, it makes you proactive. You're no longer a puppet to every external trigger, but a conscious architect of your actions. That's real emotional freedom. Death isn't morbid, it's a compass. Imagine standing at the edge of eternity, looking back at your life as it is right now. What would stand out? The hours lost scrolling, the grudges you nursed, or the moments you truly showed up fully present, fully alive? The Stoics called this practice Memento Mori, remembering that death comes for us all. Far from being macabre, this habit was their secret weapon for cutting through life's noise. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Not as a threat, but as a clarifier. Think about how differently we'd spend our days if we truly internalized this. The petty argument with a neighbor would dissolve into irrelevance. That project you've been putting off, suddenly, the fear of failure feels smaller than the regret of never trying. The Stoics weren't suggesting we dwell on death with dread. They were urging us to use it as a lens to magnify what matters. Seneca put it sharply, life is long if you know how to use it. Most of us squander time as if we're guaranteed endless tomorrows until a health scare, a loss, or a global crisis reminds us how fragile that assumption is. Consider two versions of a Monday morning. In the first, you hit snooze 3 times, rush through breakfast, and spend your commute dreading meetings. In the second, you wake with this thought, what if today is my last? Not to incite panic, but to spark precision. That meeting becomes a chance to connect meaningfully. The mundane commute transforms into stolen moments to call someone you love. Even the coffee tastes richer when you're fully there to drink it. This is Memento Mori in action, not a morbid fixation, but a life hack for immediacy and gratitude. Here's how to practice it today. Take 5 minutes to write down 3 things you'd stop doing and 3 you'd start if you learned your time was limited. Maybe you'd quit obsessing over others' opinions or finally book that trip. Then ask, what's stopping me now? Often the answer is just inertia. The Stoics used this reflection to declutter their lives, not just physically, but emotionally. Why waste a year resenting someone when you could mend it today? Why postpone joy for a someday that isn't promised? Try this tonight. Before bed, picture yourself at the end of your life, reviewing today. What would you wish you'd done differently? Not to guilt yourself, but to course correct while you still can. As Epictetus said, keep death and exile before your eyes daily, along with everything that seems terrible, but most of all, death. Then you'll never have a base thought nor cling to excess. That's the paradox. Remembering death doesn't diminish life. It electrifies it. Every ordinary moment becomes sacred when you realize it's not a rehearsal. So look at your calendar, your relationships, your unspoken dreams. What shifts when you view them through the lens of Memento Mori? The things that felt urgent lose their grip, and the truly important rises to the surface. That's the gift of this practice. It doesn't just change how you die, it transforms how you live. Your crisis is a speck in the universe. Right now, that deadline looming over you or that argument replaying in your mind might feel all-consuming. But imagine pulling the camera back, way back, until your entire city becomes a dot on the planet, your lifetime a flicker in the cosmic timeline. That's the essence of the Stoic view from above. a mental exercise Marcus Aurelius used to shrink problems to their true size. He wrote, "Think of the substance of the whole, and the brief span of time in which the universe dissolves and recreates itself. In other words, your struggles aren't erased, but they're put in their rightful place, small against the vastness of existence." Take a failed project. In the moment, it can feel like a career-ending disaster, but zoom out 5 years from now. Will this setback define you, or will it be a footnote in a longer story of growth? History's most resilient people share this trait. They don't deny pain, but they refuse to let it monopolize their perspective. Think of Thomas Edison's 10,000 failed experiments before inventing the light bulb. When asked about them, he said, "I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work." That's the view from above in action, seeing setbacks as data points in a larger arc of progress. The Stoics practiced this by literally visualizing Earth from space. Picture yourself floating above your own life, watching your current worry unfold like a scene in a movie. How much weight does it carry when you see it alongside centuries of human triumphs and tragedies? Seneca advised, "Draw your mind away from personal troubles and direct it to the greatest good." This isn't about dismissing your feelings, it's about balancing them with context. The job rejection that stings today might lead to an opportunity you can't yet see. The relationship that ended might make space for deeper connections. Here's how to apply this today. When stress starts to spiral, ask, will this matter in 5 years? If yes, focus your energy there. If no, notice how quickly your grip loosens. You can even use physical cues. Step outside and look at the sky, or find a vantage point where you can see far into the distance. The literal act of widening your view triggers a mental shift. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, Asia and Europe are corners of the universe, the ocean a drop in it. Your challenges seen from that scale become manageable. Think back to a past crisis that once felt overwhelming. How does it look to you now? Chances are, time has softened its edges, revealing lessons or silver linings you couldn't see in the thick of it. The view from above accelerates that process. It's time travel for perspective. So the next time you're trapped in the weeds of worry, pause and pull back. See your life as part of something grander, and watch how the weight you've been carrying starts to lighten. The stars have seen countless struggles rise and fade. Yours too will pass, but the wisdom you gain from seeing them clearly, that lasts. Virtue isn't abstract, it's your anchor. When everything around you feels unstable, when plans collapse, when people disappoint, when the world seems chaotic, the Stoics taught that your character is the one thing no one can take from you. Epictetus, the philosopher who began life as a slave, put it plainly, "What is the fruit of these teachings? Only the most beautiful and proper harvest, tranquility, fearlessness, and freedom." Not freedom from external circumstances, but the unshakable kind that comes from knowing you've acted with integrity, no matter what storms rage outside. Think about the last time you faced a moral crossroads. Maybe it was staying silent when a colleague took credit for your work, or biting your tongue to keep peace in a relationship. In those moments, virtue feels heavy, like carrying extra weight. But here's the paradox the Stoics uncovered. That weight becomes ballast when you anchor your choices in courage, wisdom, justice, and self-discipline. The 4 cardinal Stoic virtues. You stop wasting energy on internal debates. The path forward clarifies, even if it's the harder one. Consider a doctor working through a pandemic. Exhausted, overwhelmed, they could cut corners to save time. But their commitment to the virtue of justice, treating each patient with equal care, simplifies the decision. No weighing pros and cons, just doing what's right. Marcus Aurelius faced this daily as emperor. His journals reveal how he steadied himself. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. Virtue wasn't theoretical to him, it was his operating system for ruling an empire. Here's how to practice this today. Before any difficult conversation or decision, ask, what would the most principled version of me do? Not the cleverest or most advantageous choice, but the one aligned with your deepest values. Maybe it's admitting a mistake instead of covering it up, or giving honest feedback when it'd be easier to stay silent. The Stoics called this living in accordance with nature, not trees and rivers, but your essential human nature as a rational, social being meant to contribute. Try this reflection tonight. Recall one recent situation where you compromised your integrity for convenience, not to judge yourself, but to spot the gap between who you are and who you aspire to be. Then imagine facing that same moment with unwavering virtue. How would it change the outcome? Often, you'll find that what felt like a sacrifice in the moment becomes a source of quiet pride later. As Epictetus said, first say to yourself what kind of person you want to be, then do what you have to do. So look at your day ahead. Where's one opportunity to let virtue simplify a complex choice? Maybe it's returning the extra change a cashier gave you, or speaking up when gossip starts. These small acts are like strength training for your moral core. And when real chaos hits, when the stakes are high and the pressures on that core won't bend, because you've built it one honest choice at a time, complaining is borrowing unhappiness. Think about the last time you vented about a problem. Did replaying it actually solve anything, or did it just amplify your frustration? The Stoics saw complaining as a double theft. It steals your peace in the present while mortgaging your energy for the future. Marcus Aurelius warned himself in his journal, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." That's the Stoic alternative, not bottling up emotions, but channeling them into purposeful action. Picture two co-workers facing the same tight deadline. One spends the morning griping about unrealistic expectations, their stress growing with each complaint. The other acknowledges the pressure, then gathers the team to ask, "What's one step we can take right now to move forward?" Both feel the same initial frustration, but the second transforms it into momentum. Epictetus drew a sharp line between useful and useless speech. If you can solve your problem, what need is there for complaining? If you can't solve it, what use is there in complaining? History offers striking examples. When Seneca was exiled to a barren island by Emperor Claudius, he could have spent years railing against the injustice. Instead, he wrote letters that became timeless works of philosophy, cultivated a garden in rocky soil, and later returned to Rome wiser and more influential. His exile didn't change, but his response to it did. The Stoic distinction here is crucial. Noticing problems isn't negativity, dwelling on them without acting is. Here's how to practice this today. The next time you catch yourself complaining about politics, traffic, even the weather, pause and ask, is this within my control? If yes, take the smallest step toward improvement. If no, note it like a weather report and redirect your attention. Marcus Aurelius modeled this with his rule of silent correction, or when annoyed by others' behavior, he'd focus on his own conduct instead of vocal criticism. Try this reframe for one recurring complaint. If you're frustrated by household clutter, spend 10 minutes tidying instead of lamenting. If work processes feel inefficient, propose one concrete improvement. Action, even microscopic, breaks the cycle of helplessness that complaining reinforces. As the Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus taught, we should train ourselves not to avoid difficult things, but to overcome them. So tonight, replay your day. Where did complaints drain energy that could have fueled solutions? Notice how often venting masquerades as problem solving. Then choose one nagging frustration and attack it with 15 minutes of action. You'll discover what the Stoics knew: real power isn't in voicing displeasure, it's in refusing to let displeasure dictate your next move. Gratitude is resilience in disguise. At first glance, counting blessings might seem like a passive response to hardship. How can appreciating a sunset help when your bank account's running low or your health is failing? But the Stoics discovered something revolutionary. Gratitude isn't about ignoring pain. It's about balancing your focus so pain doesn't dominate your entire field of vision. Seneca, who amassed wealth only to lose it repeatedly through exile and political upheaval, wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." He wasn't dismissing life's struggles, he was training his mind to spot the good that persists even in the storm. Modern science backs this ancient wisdom. Studies show that people who keep gratitude journals report lower stress levels and higher emotional resilience, not because their problems vanish, but because they've rewired their attention to notice resources they'd previously taken for granted. Think of it like emotional night vision. When darkness falls, a job loss, a breakup, gratitude practice helps you spot the outlines of what still remains: your skills, your relationships, even the simple ability to breathe deeply. Here's how to apply this today. Each evening, list 3 concrete wins, not grand achievements, but small, specific moments where things went right. Maybe it's the way your dog greeted you at the door, the fact that your car started on a cold morning, or a stranger's smile in the grocery line. The Stoics called this taking account, a deliberate audit of daily gifts. Marcus Aurelius filled his journal with entries like, "I didn't get angry today," or "I had food when I was hungry." These weren't platitudes, they were anchors in turbulent times. Consider 2 people recovering from financial setbacks. One obsesses over every lost dollar, reliving the misfortune in loops. The other acknowledges the loss but also notes, "I still have a roof overhead. My health lets me work, I've rebuilt before." Both feel the sting, but the second has a psychological edge, not from denial but from a balanced view of reality. Gratitude, in this light, isn't fluffy positivity. It's tactical awareness of the resources still at your disposal. Now pause and ask yourself, what's one overlooked blessing in your life right now? It might be as fundamental as clean water or as subtle as the quiet moment you had with your coffee this morning. The more you train yourself to spot these, the more you'll realize what Epictetus meant when he said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." Gratitude doesn't change the facts of your life, it changes how you experience them. And that shift, that's where resilience takes root. You can't control outcomes, only your work. That's the brutal simplicity of Stoic detachment. Think about the last time you poured your soul into something: a job application, a creative project, a relationship, only to face rejection despite doing everything right. The sting comes not from the effort you gave, but from the unspoken expectation that effort guarantees results. The Stoics drew a bright line between these two things: your actions, which are yours to command, and the outcomes, which are tangled in countless variables beyond your reach. Epictetus, the philosopher who taught that freedom lies in distinguishing what's yours from what isn't, put it bluntly. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Consider an actor auditioning for a dream role. They can rehearse relentlessly, research the character, and deliver their lines with passion, but they can't control the director's preferences, the competition's performance, or even something as random as traffic making them late. The Stoic approach wouldn't be to shrug and not care. It would be to give everything to the preparation, then release the result like an arrow shot into the wind. Seneca captured this duality. Sometimes even to live is an act of courage. showing up, doing the work, and accepting that the rest isn't yours to decide. That's the practice. History is full of stories where detachment unlocked greatness. Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb because he was attached to each failed prototype. He kept experimenting precisely because he wasn't. J.K. Rowling submitted Harry Potter to 12 publishers before one said yes, not because the earlier rejections didn't hurt, but because she refused to let them define her effort's worth. The Stoics would nod at these stories. They understood that obsession with outcomes is like trying to control the weather. It exhausts you without changing a thing. Here's how to practice this today. Pick one area where you're anxiously awaiting a result, a promotion decision, a loan approval, even a text reply. Now ask, have I done all I can reasonably do? If yes, mentally place that outcome on a shelf labeled, "Not mine." This isn't passivity, it's precision. It's recognizing that your power ends where the universe's begins. Marcus Aurelius framed this as an internal fortress. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Try this reframe the next time you catch yourself agonizing over something outside your hands. Picture your effort as a seed you've planted. You can water it, give it sunlight, protect it from pests, but you can't force it to grow. Nature has its own timeline, its own whims. Your job was to plant well. The rest, that's life's domain, as Epictetus taught. No great thing is created suddenly. Detachment isn't giving up. It's making peace with the fact that some chapters of the story aren't yours to write. So look at that goal you've been white-knuckling. What shifts when you focus entirely on the quality of your effort and let the result be what it will be? You might find, as the Stoics did, that this surrender isn't weakness, it's the ultimate form of control over your attention, your energy, your peace. And in that space, resilience quietly grows. Obstacles aren't barriers, they're the path. Think of a weightlifter adding plates to the bar, not because it's easy, but because resistance is how muscles grow. The Stoics saw life's challenges the same way, not as nuisances to avoid, but as the very training ground for resilience. Marcus Aurelius, who faced rebellions and plagues while ruling Rome, wrote, "The obstacle in the path becomes the path." Never forget, within every obstacle is an opportunity to improve your condition. That shift from resisting hardship to recognizing it as a teacher changes everything. Consider how differently two people might approach a delayed flight. One fumes at the gate, refreshing the departure time like a gambler at a slot machine. The other pulls out a book they've been meaning to read or strikes up a conversation with a fellow traveler. Same situation, radically different experiences. The Stoics would argue the second person isn't just making the best of a bad situation, they're actively using it as practice for patience, adaptability, or even kindness. These aren't abstract virtues, they're muscles that only strengthen when tested. History's most resilient figures shared this mindset. Thomas Edison's lab burned to the ground at 67, destroying years of work. His response, "Thank goodness all our mistakes were burned up, now we can start fresh." He didn't deny the loss, he reframed it as a chance to rebuild smarter. The Stoics called this antifragility, the idea that some things don't just endure chaos but thrive because of it. Your emotional resilience works the same way. Each time you meet a challenge head-on, a difficult conversation, a financial setback, even a mundane hassle like a traffic jam, you're not just surviving, you're upgrading your capacity to handle whatever comes next. Here's how to put this into practice today. Identify one obstacle you've been avoiding or resenting, maybe a tough workout, an awkward but necessary conversation, or a skill you're struggling to master. Now ask, what quality could this help me develop? A project setback might be patience training. A disagreement could hone your communication skills. Even physical discomfort, like cold showers or early mornings, builds discipline. The key is to stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this preparing me for?" Try this reframe the next time you hit a snag. Instead of reacting with frustration, pause and say aloud, "This is my training." Watch how it changes your posture literally and mentally. Shoulders drop from defensive tension. Breathing slows. The obstacle hasn't vanished, but your relationship to it has. As Epictetus, who turned the brutality of slavery into a philosophy of freedom, taught, difficulties show men what they are. So look at that challenge you've been dodging. How might it be the exact teacher you need right now? The marathon runner doesn't curse the hill. They know it's what makes the finish line meaningful. Your struggles aren't detours, they're the route, and every step forward on that path, that's resilience in motion. The fewer needs you have, the richer you are. That paradox lies at the heart of Stoic simplicity. Picture two travelers, one burdened with overflowing suitcases, constantly worrying about lost luggage or stolen valuables. The other carries only a small pack, moving freely, unshackled by possessions. The Stoics argued we're all travelers in life, and our emotional baggage weighs far more than physical objects. Seneca, who amassed great wealth only to voluntarily live in austerity for periods, wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." His insight wasn't about rejecting comfort, but about recognizing how desire itself becomes a cage. Modern life bombards us with manufactured needs, the latest phone upgrade, the trendier wardrobe, the perfectly curated social media life. Each new want whispers that happiness lies just one purchase away, but the Stoics practiced deliberate reduction. They'd periodically sleep on the floor, wear plain clothing or fast, not as punishment, but to prove to themselves they could thrive without luxuries. Imagine trying this today, a week without social media. No scrolling, no comparing, no dopamine hits from likes. At first, it might feel like withdrawal. But soon, you'd notice something unexpected: the return of mental space, the quiet joy of a real conversation, the relief from constant performance. That's the freedom Seneca described when he said, "Until we have begun to go without them, we fail to realize how unnecessary many things are." Consider how much energy we expend chasing desires that don't truly serve us, the promotion that requires sacrificing health, the relationship that demands shrinking yourself. Even small daily compulsions, checking email constantly, chasing viral trends, chip away at our autonomy. Epictetus, born into slavery, understood this deeply. Freedom isn't secured by filling up on what you lack, but by stripping away what's superfluous. His words cut through 20 centuries of consumer conditioning. Real wealth isn't in accumulation, but in liberation from endless wanting. Here's how to practice this today. Pick one desire that's been nagging at you: a material purchase, an external validation, even an unhealthy habit. Ask yourself, what would happen if I simply didn't pursue this? Often, you'll find the anticipation of loss is worse than the reality. The Stoics called this voluntary discomfort, temporarily giving up something to prove you're not enslaved by it. Try a day without caffeine, a weekend without online shopping, or turning off notifications for an afternoon. Each small act of refusal strengthens your inner citadel against the siege of endless wants. Tonight, as you prepare for bed, ask yourself, what's one desire I can release tomorrow to feel lighter? Maybe it's the need to always be right in arguments, or the craving for dessert when you're already full. Observe how often wants arise from habit rather than true need. That gap between impulse and action, that's where Stoic freedom lies. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, very little is needed to make a happy life. The rest is just noise, and the quieter your wants become, the louder your joy can be. Noise drowns wisdom, silence reveals it. Think about the last time you truly sat in stillness. No podcasts playing, no notifications buzzing, no mental to-do lists churning. For most of us, that's a rare moment in today's world, where we're drowning in a sea of endless stimulation. The Stoics, though, carved out silence deliberately, not as empty space, but as fertile ground for clarity. Marcus Aurelius, who governed an empire in constant chaos, wrote, "Nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That wasn't poetic escapism, it was tactical. He knew that without stillness, even the best mind becomes a reactive machine, jerked around by every external demand. Consider how differently decisions unfold in noise versus silence. Picture two leaders facing a crisis. One frantically scrolls through opinions on social media, calls endless meetings, and drowns in analysis paralysis. The other steps away, even for 10 minutes, to sit alone with their thoughts. Which one's more likely to spot the elegant solution hidden beneath the panic? The Stoics called this hesychia, a purposeful pause to let the mental sediment settle. Seneca practiced it daily, advising, "Be silent as much as you can. Talk only when you must, and then say only what's necessary." In an age without smartphones, he recognized how easily chatter, internal and external, scatters our wisdom. Here's how to reclaim this practice today. Start with just 5 minutes of deliberate silence, no music, no screens, no multitasking. Sit by a window, watch the clouds, and observe your thoughts like passing trains. Don't judge them, just notice. You'll likely discover two things. First, how addicted your mind is to constant stimulation, and second, how clarity emerges when you stop drowning it out. The modern equivalent might be resisting the urge to fill a quiet elevator with phones scrolling, or eating lunch without a podcast. These tiny pauses are resistance training against the tyranny of noise. Think back to a recent moment when silence surprised you, maybe during a power outage, or early in the morning before the world woke up. What insights surfaced when you weren't stuffing every second with input? That's the Stoic secret. Silence isn't the absence of something. It's the presence of everything you've been too distracted to hear. Your best ideas, your truest priorities. They've been waiting in the quiet all along. Tonight, try this. Before bed, mute your devices and sit with one question. What's one thing I'd see clearly if I stopped long enough to look? The answer might not come immediately, but that's the point. Wisdom isn't rushed. Like Marcus Aurelius scribbling in his journal at dawn, you're not just practicing silence. You're making space for the voice that matters most, your own. Fighting change is like resisting the seasons. You might prefer endless summer, but autumn comes regardless, stripping the trees bare only to make way for spring's rebirth. The Stoics didn't just tolerate life's impermanence, they revered it as the very fabric of existence. Heraclitus, the philosopher who deeply influenced Stoicism, famously said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice," capturing the truth that everything, careers, relationships, even our own bodies, exists in a state of constant flux. To rail against this is to exhaust yourself trying to hold back the tide. Consider how we cling to outdated versions of our lives. A promotion vanishes in a corporate reshuffle, and we mourn as if stability were ever promised. A mirror reflects new wrinkles, and we rage against time itself. Yet nature shows us another way. Trees don't weep when their leaves fall. They conserve energy for the next cycle. The Stoics saw this wisdom centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Loss is nothing but change, and change is nature's delight." What if we viewed transitions not as theft, but as transformation? Take a relationship that ends. In the raw pain of separation, it's easy to frame it as failure. but what if it's simply completion, a chapter that taught what it needed to before making space for new growth? The Stoic practice here isn't to suppress grief, but to expand perspective. Seneca, reflecting on friendship's impermanence, advised, "Hold everything dear, but nothing as if you couldn't lose it." This isn't pessimism, it's liberation. When you stop demanding permanence from fleeting things, you start seeing endings as necessary thresholds. Modern science echoes this ancient insight. Studies on neuroplasticity reveal our brains thrive on novelty. Change literally rewires us for resilience. Career shifts once feared often lead to unexpected callings. The artist who loses her vision learns to sculpt. The athlete whose injury ends his career discovers coaching. These aren't consolations, they're proof that adaptability is coded into our biology. The Stoics would nod. Resistance to change isn't just futile, it's counter to our design. Here's how to practice this today. Identify one change you've been resisting: a child leaving home, a fading passion for old hobbies, even the evolution of your beliefs. Ask, what if this isn't loss but the universe making room? Visualize yourself as a riverbed, letting old waters flow out so new currents can arrive. Epictetus offered a blunt tool for acceptance. Don't seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for them to happen as they do. Tonight, reflect on this question. What change scares you most because it feels like an ending? Now imagine looking back from 5 years in the future. How might this transition appear then, not as a wall but a doorway? The leaves must fall for the tree to grow stronger. Your storms, too, are clearing space for light you can't yet see. A ship without a port drifts endlessly, caught in currents of busyness, reacting to every wave but never truly sailing toward something. That's the difference between motion and purpose, between filling days and fulfilling them. The Stoics didn't just ask what we do, they demanded why. Epictetus cut to the core. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Not goals tied to external rewards, promotions, likes, possessions, but actions anchored to something unshakable: your character, your principles, your reason for being here at all. Think about how easily days dissolve into checklists. You cross off tasks, answer emails, attend meetings, yet by evening, there's a hollow sense of having moved without progressing. Contrast that with days where one action helping a colleague grow, creating something meaningful, or even a quiet moment of presence with a loved one leaves you deeply satisfied. The difference isn't effort, it's alignment. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet his journal obsesses not over conquests, but over a single question: am I acting as the person I aspire to be? His purpose wasn't power, it was virtue, and that clarity turned routine decisions into sacred acts. Here's the modern challenge: we confuse purpose with passion. We wait for lightning bolts of inspiration to reveal our calling, overlooking that purpose isn't found. It's built through small, consistent choices. A nurse doesn't need grand gestures to live her purpose. Changing bandages with care is enough. A teacher fulfills his in every patient explanation. The Stoics called this living in accordance with nature, not trees and rivers, but your unique human capacity to contribute rationally and ethically. When Epictetus said, "Know what's yours to do and then do it like a human being," he was urging this daily realignment. Try this today. Before a single task, pause and ask, does this serve my deeper why? Not in lofty life mission terms, but in the quiet truth of who you're choosing to become. Maybe it's declining a gossip session to protect your integrity, or spending 20 extra minutes on a project to honor your standards. Seneca wrote letters to friends not out of obligation, but because connection was part of his purpose, an anchor in turbulent political times. Your anchors might be creativity, service, curiosity, or growth. The key is to name them, then let them steer your smallest actions. Tonight, reflect on one moment when you felt fully aligned, not productive but purposeful. What quality were you embodying? That's your compass. Write it down. Today, I want to act from. Just one word: perseverance, kindness, courage. Then watch how it transforms ordinary choices into whispers of something greater. The ship reaches port not by chasing every wind, but by fixing its course on the North Star. Your purpose is that star, and every anchored action, no matter how small, draws you closer. Events are neutral, your story colors them. Think about the last time you heard gossip at work. Maybe someone whispered that the boss was favoring a certain employee, or that layoffs were coming. Immediately, your mind starts spinning narratives. Are they targeting my department? Is my job at risk? But here's the Stoic interruption. The rumor itself is just sound waves in the air. The panic, the resentment, the sleepless nights, those come from the meaning you layer on top. Marcus Aurelius practiced cutting through these layers with surgical precision. Strip away the legend that encrusts it, he wrote. See it for what it is as it is and name it properly. Consider two people stuck in the same traffic jam. One white-knuckles the wheel, muttering about idiot drivers and ruined schedules, their stress hormones spiking. The other takes a deep breath, turns on an audiobook, and uses the time to learn something new. Same gridlock, radically different experiences. The Stoics would argue the second person isn't just coping better, they're seeing the situation more accurately. A traffic delay isn't inherently bad. It's a cluster of cars on a road. The suffering comes from the story we paste onto it. This shouldn't be happening. I'll be late, everything's falling apart. Epictetus, the philosopher who taught that we're disturbed not by events but by our opinions about them, offered a liberating question. What's really under your control here? This habit isn't about denying emotions or pretending frustration doesn't exist. It's about recognizing the invisible brushstrokes we paint over reality. A project setback is just an outcome until we label it a failure and attach shame. A friend's curt text is just words on a screen until we interpret it as rejection and spiral into loneliness. Seneca, who faced exile and political intrigue, called this the double suffering phenomenon. First the event, then our self-inflicted drama about it. His remedy: separate the thing itself from your representation of it. Here's how to practice this today. Pick one situation that's triggering you, a critical comment, a delayed flight, even a rainy weekend. Write down the bare facts. My boss said the report needs revisions. The flight is rescheduled for 2 hours later. The forecast predicts precipitation. Then notice the layers you've added. She thinks I'm incompetent. My whole trip is ruined. The weather is out to get me. That gap between fact and fiction. That's where your power lies. Try this reframe the next time you catch yourself catastrophizing. Ask, what's the simplest version of what's actually happening? You'll often find the raw event carries far less weight than the baggage you've strapped to it. Like Marcus Aurelius advising himself to wash away the dust of opinion. You're not changing the world, you're clearing the lens through which you see it. So look at that challenge you've been dreading. What happens when you strip away the labels of good or bad and just let it be what it is? The traffic jam becomes unexpected reading time. The cancelled plan turns into space for rest. The criticism morphs into data for growth. Reality doesn't bend, but your relationship with it does. And in that shift, resilience quietly takes root. Fear isn't a stop sign, it's a starting line. Think about the last time your stomach knotted before a big moment, maybe stepping on stage, asking for a raise, or finally sharing that creative project with the world. The instinct is to freeze, waiting for the fear to vanish before taking action. But the Stoics flipped this script entirely. Courage to them wasn't the absence of fear, it was action in spite of it. Seneca, who faced exile and political danger, wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." He wasn't talking about battlefield heroics, but the daily choice to move forward when every fiber screams to retreat. Consider public speaking, a fear so common it outranks death in some surveys. The amateur waits until they feel ready, delaying indefinitely. The professional speaks anyway, shaky hands and all, because they know confidence isn't a prerequisite. It's a byproduct of repeated action. The Stoics called this prohersis, the discipline of aligning actions with principles, regardless of emotion. Marcus Aurelius, leading troops into battle, confessed in his journals to sleepless nights and dread, yet he still mounted his horse at dawn. His courage wasn't fearlessness, it was commitment to duty stronger than his discomfort. Here's how this plays out in modern life. That difficult email you've been avoiding, the one addressing a conflict or proposing a bold idea, won't feel easier tomorrow. The magic happens when you hit send with your pulse racing. Each time you do, you're not just solving a problem, you're training your neural pathways to associate fear with forward motion, not paralysis. Seneca observed, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." Courage is simply choosing to walk before the drag begins. Try this today. Pick one fear you've been circling, a tough conversation, a career leap, even something as small as returning an incorrect order at a restaurant. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could realistically happen? Often, you'll find the actual risk pales next to the monstrous version your anxiety painted. Then take the smallest step, draft that email, schedule the uncomfortable meeting, raise your hand in the meeting before you've polished your comment to perfection. Action, even imperfect, dismantles fear's illusion of control. Tonight, reflect on this question. Where have I been waiting for confidence instead of building it through action? The gap between "I'm scared" and "I did it anyway" is where resilience forges itself. As Epictetus, who transformed from a slave to a revered teacher, put it, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters." Your fears aren't walls, they're weights, and every time you lift them, you grow stronger. You don't need to invent strength, emulate it. Think about the last time you faced a crisis. Did you feel like you had to figure it all out from scratch? The Stoics would say that's unnecessary. For centuries, they turned to role models, real people who'd walked through fire and emerged wiser, not as distant idols, but as living proof that resilience is possible. Marcus Aurelius kept a mental gallery of mentors, writing, "When you need encouragement, think of the qualities of those around you, the energy of this one, the modesty of that one, the generosity of another." He wasn't just admiring them, he was borrowing their courage like a torch in the dark. Consider how differently we approach role models today. Modern heroes are often celebrated for talent or luck, athletes with genetic gifts, entrepreneurs who struck gold. But Stoic exemplars like Cato the Younger or Epictetus earned their place through how they faced adversity, not avoided it. Cato, the Roman senator who chose death over surrendering his principles, didn't just defy Julius Caesar, he showed generations how to stand firm when the world demands compromise. Seneca wrote of him, "Cato's virtue was greater than his era could bear." That's the Stoic distinction. True role models aren't just successful, they're steadfast. Here's how this translates to your life. Maybe you've watched a mentor handle failure with grace, a boss who took blame for a team mistake, or a parent who rebuilt after financial loss. Their actions become a blueprint. When you're next in crisis, ask, how would they navigate this? You're not copying, you're contextualizing. A young entrepreneur facing bankruptcy might channel Thomas Edison's relentless experimentation. A soldier with PTSD could look to Admiral James Stockdale, who credited Epictetus' teachings for surviving 7 years as a POW. Role models bridge the gap between philosophy and practice. Try this exercise today. List 3 people, historical or personal, who have faced hardships with dignity, not just those who won, but those who endured. Then pick one current challenge and imagine their response. Would your grandmother have wasted energy complaining, or would she have rolled up her sleeves? Would Lincoln have obsessed over critics or focused on the next step? The Stoics called this procession, mindful attention to exemplars. It's not about living someone else's life. It's about recognizing that resilience isn't born, it's borrowed, practiced, and made your own. So tonight, as you reflect, ask yourself, who embodies the kind of strength I want to cultivate? Not perfection, but persistence. Not luck, but unwavering principles. Their stories aren't just inspiration, they're invitations. And when you stand at your own crossroads, you'll realize you're never truly alone. Centuries of resilience walk with you. The bigger the ego, the harder the fall. Think about the last time you dug your heels into an argument, refusing to back down even as evidence mounted against you. That stubbornness wasn't strength, it was fragility in disguise. The Stoics saw humility not as weakness, but as the ultimate strength, because it leaves room for growth. Epictetus, the philosopher who began life as a slave, put it bluntly: it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. That's the paradox of ego. The more convinced we are of our own infallibility, the more blind spots we accumulate. Consider how differently 2 co-workers might handle criticism. One dismisses feedback as jealousy or misunderstanding, doubling down on their methods. The other leans in with curiosity. What if there's truth here? The first might cling to short-term superiority, but the second, they're the ones who evolve. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the Roman Empire at its peak, reminded himself daily, "You're just a soul carrying around a corpse." That jarring image wasn't self-loathing, it was a gut check against the intoxicating pull of power. He knew that the moment you believe your own hype, you stop growing. Modern life feeds ego in subtle ways: social media algorithms that reward posturing, workplaces that conflate confidence with competence. But the Stoics practiced deliberate humility. They'd seek out critics, not sycophants. They'd publicly correct their own mistakes, like Cato the Younger, who famously stood in the Roman Forum to admit he'd misjudged a political ally. That act didn't diminish his authority, it cemented his integrity. Seneca captured this beautifully. No man was ever wise by chance. Wisdom isn't bestowed, it's earned through the willingness to say, "I was wrong." Here's how to practice this today. The next time you're defensive, maybe someone critiques your parenting style or questions your expertise, pause and ask, what's the kernel of truth here? You don't have to accept every criticism wholesale, but humility means mining even harsh feedback for growth. A modern Stoic might thank a colleague for pointing out an oversight, or openly share a past failure to help others learn. These aren't acts of self-effacement, they're power moves, as Epictetus taught. If someone tells you that you know nothing, you won't be upset because you know it's true. That self-awareness is liberating. Tonight, reflect on this question. Where is ego masquerading as confidence in your life? Maybe it's resisting mentorship because you're experienced enough, or dismissing new methods in your field as passing fads. Notice how often pride whispers, "You've got this figured out." That's the moment to get suspicious. The wisest minds stay hungry. The strongest leaders stay students. And the most resilient souls, they know the ground is firmer when you're not standing on a pedestal of your own making. Loneliness is fear, solitude is power. That distinction lies at the heart of this Stoic habit, not just tolerating being alone, but cultivating it as sacred space for self-discovery. Think about how modern life pathologizes solitude. We scroll in elevators to avoid silence, mistake constant connection for fulfillment, and treat time alone as something to endure rather than explore. The Stoics flipped this script entirely. Seneca, who wrote letters from self-imposed retreats, observed, "Be wary of the crowd. It's not solitude that damages us, but perpetual distraction." He wasn't advocating isolation. He was prescribing intentional aloneness as the antidote to social dependency. Picture two versions of a lunch break. One person eats at their desk while refreshing social media, absorbing fragments of others' curated lives. Another takes their sandwich to a park bench, noticing the way sunlight filters through leaves, or turning a problem over in their mind without external noise. The first emerges more drained than before. The second returns with renewed clarity. That's the Stoic secret. Solitude isn't empty space, it's fertile ground. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by the chaos of imperial duties, carved out moments to commune with his journal, writing, "Nowhere can you retreat more peacefully than within your own mind." History's most resilient minds shared this practice. Nietzsche composed his best work walking alone in the Alps. Emily Dickinson's seclusion birthed poetry that outlived her era. The common thread: they didn't just endure solitude, they harnessed its creative and clarifying power. Seneca took this further, scheduling regular conversations with himself to audit his growth. Imagine applying that today. A weekly hour without devices, entertainment, or even books, just you and your thoughts. At first, it might feel unsettling, like standing still in a river accustomed to rushing. But soon, you'd notice what the Stoics knew, that beneath the surface chatter, there's a deeper current of insight waiting to be heard. Here's how to start small. Try a 20-minute walk without headphones or podcasts. Notice how your mind initially rebels, scrambling for stimulation, then gradually settles. Pay attention to what surfaces, not just random thoughts, but patterns, solutions, even forgotten dreams. The Stoics called this process attention to the inner landscape. Modern psychology confirms its value. Studies show that solitude boosts creativity, problem solving, and emotional regulation when approached intentionally. Tonight, ask yourself, what truth might solitude reveal if I stopped drowning it out? Maybe it's a neglected passion whispering beneath the noise of obligations. Or a buried grief needing acknowledgement. Or simply the realization that you're enough, just as you are, without external validation. That's the ultimate Stoic shift, from fearing aloneness to recognizing it as the birthplace of unshakable self-reliance. The crowd's applause fades, the likes evaporate, but the strength forged in quiet moments that endures. Words are tools, use them sparingly. The Stoics didn't just avoid idle chatter, they saw speech as a disciplined action, like a surgeon wielding a scalpel, every cut intentional, every word carrying weight. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, warned that the tongue is the most dangerous weapon we possess, capable of destroying relationships, reputations, and even inner peace with a single careless remark. Imagine two colleagues at a team lunch. One dominates the conversation with unsolicited opinions and office gossip, while the other listens deeply, speaking only to clarify or contribute something meaningful. By the end of the meal, whose words linger with respect, consider how often we default to filling silence with noise, venting about trivial frustrations, speculating about others' motives, or rehearsing arguments we'll never have. These aren't just wasted breaths, they're emotional leaks. Seneca compared reckless speech to pouring precious water into the sand. The more you pour out, the less you have left for what truly matters. The Stoic alternative isn't muteness but precision. Before speaking, they'd ask, is this true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? 3 filters that transform communication from reaction to ritual. Here's how to practice this today. In your next meeting, resist the urge to be the first voice heard. Instead, count to 10 after someone finishes speaking. That pause accomplishes two things. It prevents impulsive interruptions, and it often reveals that your initial thought wasn't as vital as you assumed. Marcus Aurelius modeled this in imperial councils, writing, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" His restraint wasn't timidity. It was the confidence of a leader who knew silence often speaks louder than words. Think back to a recent conversation you regret, perhaps a sarcastic comment that landed poorly, or a secret shared too freely. What fueled that moment? Often, it's not malice, but habit, the autopilot of filling space or seeking validation. The Stoics called this lalia, empty talk that drains energy without creating value. Contrast that with eulalia, purposeful speech that uplifts or enlightens. One leaves you exhausted, the other leaves you aligned. Tonight, reflect on this question. What's one sentence I spoke today that didn't need to be said? And one that did. The gap between them is where Stoic discipline begins, because every word is a choice, not just to express yourself, but to define yourself. As Epictetus put it, you are what you give your attention to, and nothing demands more attention than the words you unleash into the world. A day unexamined is resilience wasted. Picture this: you collapse into bed after 12 hectic hours, reach for your phone, and numb your mind with scrolling until sleep drags you under. The day slips away unmarked, its lessons buried beneath a haze of distraction. Now imagine an alternative: 10 minutes with a notebook, retracing your steps, not to dwell on regrets, but to mine the day for wisdom. Seneca called this putting the day on trial, writing, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and measure my words and actions." This wasn't self-punishment. It was deliberate refinement, like a blacksmith tempering steel after each strike. Consider how differently two people might process the same frustrating workday. One replays the tension in loops, amplifying irritation until it bleeds into the next morning. The other asks, "What triggered me? Where did I overreact?" What's one small adjustment for tomorrow? That shift from ruminating to reflecting turns chaos into curriculum. Marcus Aurelius modeled this in his journals, dissecting his own outbursts with clinical detachment. When you lose your temper, you've suffered a greater loss than the person who provoked you. His nightly practice wasn't about tallying failures. It was about spotting patterns before they hardened into habits. Here's how to put this into practice tonight. Grab any notebook and answer 3 questions. What tested me today? How did I respond? What would virtue look like next time? Be specific. Maybe you snapped at a coworker under deadline pressure. Note the exact moment patience frayed. Perhaps you avoided a difficult conversation. Trace the fear behind the hesitation. The Stoics called this melite, the discipline of rehearsal. By reviewing challenges in daylight, you prepare for them in darkness. Try this reframe: view your day as a series of experiments, not performances. A failed moment isn't a verdict, it's data. When Seneca advised, "Assess yourself daily," he wasn't demanding perfection, he was offering a tool for incremental growth. Your evening review becomes the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. So tonight, as you turn off the lights, ask, what's one way today's friction strengthened me? Maybe it revealed a hidden limit or an unexpected patience. Resilience isn't built in grand gestures, it's forged in these quiet moments of honest reckoning. The day is done, but its lessons, those are just beginning. Imagine holding a toolbox, not one filled with hammers and nails, but 25 tried and true habits for emotional resilience, forged over centuries by Stoic minds who faced wars, exiles, and plagues. These aren't abstract ideas gathering dust in philosophy books. They're daily practices, like mental push-ups for the soul. Marcus Aurelius didn't become unshakable overnight. he journaled through sleepless nights. Epictetus didn't preach freedom from suffering as a slave. He lived it one deliberate choice at a time. That's the heart of Stoicism, not passive theory, but active training for life's unpredictable arena. Consider how these habits interlock like armor. Morning reflection sets your intentions. The dichotomy of control filters out noise. Negative visualization prepares you for storms. Amor Fati turns obstacles into fuel. Each one builds on the last, not as a rigid checklist, but as a flexible framework for whatever chaos today throws your way. The beauty, you don't need to master them all at once. Resilience isn't built in grand declarations, but in the quiet consistency of showing up, choosing journaling over scrolling, silence over complaint, virtue over convenience. Epictetus, who knew hardship intimately, left us this truth. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That's the secret. These 25 habits aren't about perfection, they're about direction. Every time you pause before reacting, every moment you reframe a setback as a lesson, you're not just practicing Stoicism, you're proving that resilience isn't a trait you're born with, but a skill you sharpen with each challenge. So here's your invitation. This week, pick one habit from this toolkit. Maybe it's the 5-minute morning reflection or the evening review of your day. Perhaps it's catching yourself mid-complaint and shifting to action. Then share your progress below, not to perform, but to participate in a 2,000-year-old conversation about what it means to stand firm in the storm. Because unpredictability isn't your enemy, it's the best teacher you'll ever have, and every small step you take, that's you bending chaos into growth. The Stoics handed you the tools. Now go build something unshakable.